Hi, my name is Connor Riley, and on this week's Connor in Coverage, we're going to be talking Bears, Punts, and Battlestar Galactica. Our first winner this week is the tight end position for Georgia. Now, Brock Bowers is probably going to be on this list every single week, and he showed why once again on Saturday. 127 all-purpose yards, 2 more touchdowns, a 75-yard rushing touchdown. He's got 3 carries on the season for Georgia. All 3 have resulted in touchdowns. He's pretty clearly not just one of the best players on the Georgia team, but perhaps even the entire country, in a way the Heisman might not necessarily capture his individual brilliance. But as great as Bowers is as an individual, let's not forget about what Darnold Washington brings to this team. His stat line wasn't as impressive as Bowers was on Saturday, catching 2 passes for 39 yards. But it's the way that Washington interacts with Bowers and open things up, not just for him, but for the rest of this offense that has Kirby Smart singing the praises of his junior tight end.
You can't look at the big picture in college football, but is there a player more dynamic right now than Brock in college?
You just said it. I don't know that there is because I don't get to see it. I don't feel like I've seen many games this year, but it's hard for me ever to do comparison. But what he does, I don't think people understand what an incredible blocker he is. And he doesn't get to do that much. The other incredible player out there is Darnell. If you go back and look at Brock's biggest plays this year, Darnell's been a big part of that. And I was so proud and happy to see him. The first play of the game, he's wide open, and the play was to go to him. And Stetson took a shot, being aggressive, and Darnell was there. The very next play, Brock gets a touchdown, and Darnell's celebrating. He's the first one in the end zone to go celebrate with him. His block sprung him. And again, Darnell's blocking combined with what Brock does on the perimeter, and even the catch Darnell made today was pretty incredible. So the package of those two, they complement each other really well.
Georgia's without A.D. Mitchell and Arian Smith at the moment. Kenny Mcintosh is dealing with a thigh contusion. On Saturday, Ladd McConkey didn't exactly deliver his best performance. Georgia's going to need these tight ends to play up to the mantle of being the best tight end room in the country. And through the first 4 games of the season, both Bowers and Washington have played up to that standard. Now, our first loser is turnovers. After the South Carolina game, a reporter, not me, made reference to the fact that Georgia hadn't turned the ball over in the first 3 games of the season. And Kirby Smart knew exactly what had just happened as a reporter had jinxed Georgia, and that proved to play out pretty quickly on Saturday with Georgia turning the ball over 3 times in the first half. 2 of those came via McConkey, who muffed the punt and then fumbled the reception later. And while the reception fumble happens, it was the punt mishap that had Kirby Smart more frustrated than anything.
I was frustrated there with Ladd's probably a mistake to field the punt or not fair catch the punt. He knows that. Nobody's more disappointed than Ladd is. But that started it. Then you're going to have a fumble every now and then. That's part of football. But make good decisions when the ball's in transfer and in kicking situations. And we didn't make a very smart one there.
McConkey wasn't the only one responsible for a turnover, though, as Stetson Bennett threw the first interception of his season. It seemed like a miscommunication there between Marcus Rosemary, Jack Saint, and Bennett himself. Georgia still only has 3 turnovers through the first 4 games of the season, but going forward, they can't turn the ball over in the manner in which they did on Saturday. It's the biggest reason why a game that Georgia didn't punt the ball in was as close as a 17-point final score deficit. Georgia's got to be cleaner on the offensive side of the ball and prevent those turnovers from happening in the first place, much as they did for the first 3 games of the season. Our next winner is Bear Alexander. Now, Georgia was largely without Jalen Carter on Saturday as he was limited with an ankle injury, and that opened the door a little bit for the freshman defensive tackle. He had a nice pass deflection, while Kirby Smart couldn't go into further detail about how Alexander had played until after he had a chance to review the tape. He liked what he had seen from Alexander, the freshman defensive tackle, in the run-up to Saturday's game, and his play on Saturday further bore out why Alexander looks to be in position to potentially contribute for this Georgia team this season.
Well, I can't. I had to see it. I saw he made the play, batted the ball in. There were times I didn't even know he was in there. I knew he played more snaps today. He practiced his best week of practice this week, so we felt like he was going to be able to play more snaps. And we thought that if they drove the ball on us and they went tempo, we would need to play more guys. And Trey did a good job rotating those guys through. And Bill Norton would have to play a few more snaps today. So that was good. We're increasing our depth.
There are a couple of reasons we haven't heard much from Alexander so far. And the biggest being that he missed almost all of spring practice with a labrum injury that required surgery. Add in the fact that it's pretty rare for a defensive lineman to make a serious impact as a freshman, and you can understand why Alexander took a couple weeks to get up to speed there. Georgia's already starting Michael Williams on the defensive line, and if Alexander keeps progressing like he has so far this past season, he might be not too far away from contributing in a very meaningful way for Georgia. Though obviously a lot of that will depend on how Carter's ankle heals in the next couple of weeks. We expect when Georgia plays Auburn and Missouri and Vanderbilt in these next couple of games, Carter's going to be a very important piece to this team, where he wasn't so much so on Saturday against Kent State. Our next loser, fake punts. 2 weeks in a row, an opposing team has hit a fake punt on Georgia, and what makes this past weekend one so much even more concerning is that Georgia was in the right defense for it. They had a feeling that it was coming, and they still couldn't stop it.
Concerning. I mean, I'm concerned every week by a fake punt. When you're a heavy favorite, what does the other team think? I got to steal a possession, right? So what do you work on all week? Can't steal a possession, and we spent just an enormous amount of time, and we were actually in our prevent the fake call. It was 4th and 1 or inches, and they did a good job. We had somebody lose eye control, somebody had him man and missed him, and we got to do a better job. It's unfortunate because the defense deserved to stop there, but we didn't stop it.
Now, after the conversion, Smart was spotted chatting on the sideline with Dan Jackson there. In the next couple of games, Georgia's going to have a massive talent advantage, and really in every game of the season, that's going to be the case. The Bulldogs are a 28.5-point favorite going on the road into Missouri this week. And with that kind of talent advantage, teams are going to get tricky in terms of ways of creating extra possessions. That might mean they're more aggressive on 4th down in terms of going for it. Or, as we've seen these past 2 weeks, teams try and get tricky and try to get this Georgia team sleeping. The fact that 2 straight weeks a team has hit a fake punt on Georgia is borderline unacceptable for a team that preaches discipline and has a coach as fanatical about special teams as Kirby Smart. That's going to be something that is cleaned up going forward for Georgia. But it wasn't all bad on special teams for Georgia this past weekend, and our final winner here is Jalen Walker. Now, Jack Podlesny deserves some praise here as well, as he once again made all 3 of his field goals, but Georgia shouldn't be asking Jack Podlesny to kick 3 field goals in a game at any point this season. Walker, on the other hand, made the most out of his moment in the sun. The freshman hasn't exactly cracked the inside linebacker rotation yet, but he found his way on the field in a punt return formation on Saturday, and he blocked a punt, forcing a safety for the Bulldogs.
Proud of him. He got taken off my team a couple weeks ago for not getting this guy, and he didn't pout, he didn't complain, he didn't go to transfer portal, he just kept on fighting, and Darius got a little banged up, and Darius Smith, and Darius was going to start on it, and we stuck Jalen back in there, and lo and behold, he makes a big play and blocks the punt.
Now, the transfer portal comments were in jest, as Georgia has big plans for Walker going forward. You only have to look at Shmael Munden and Jamon Jumas-Johnson as players who started out as special teams players before ultimately graduating to full-time starters on this defense. I think it's very clear after this past weekend and what we've already seen and heard from Walker in both fall camp and spring practice, that Walker is going to follow a very similar trajectory for the Georgia Bulldogs. And while he's only a freshman right now, it's incredibly encouraging that he's making big plays for Georgia. The deep shot this week is on the new era of Georgia football, which, if you couldn't tell midway through the second quarter, we were very much living through with this Georgia team. The Bulldogs never trailed on Saturday. They had a double-digit lead for pretty much the entire second half, and yet there was still a sense of uneasiness out there in terms of what we saw online and also what we saw on the field. The Bulldogs never punted on Saturday, once again displaying a promising offensive day, and had 3 sacks and forced a turnover with Chris Smith icing things at the end. And yet this wasn't a Georgia team that we felt played its best game, and in all honesty, probably played a C effort. It speaks to where this Georgia program has gotten to and what the national championship last year brought. This time a week ago, there were pundits out there, Paul Feinbaum among them, declaring that Georgia was the new Alabama. Well, it's not exactly fair to Georgia to put them in that comparison, because what Georgia is doing right now is quite different from what Alabama has been doing in the past. And Alabama also has won multiple national titles, and Georgia still just has the one. But for all the hand-wringing that has come out of the Kent State performance, it says a lot about where Georgia is for them to have a double-digit victory at home in a game they never trailed in and still have some worry about this team. The Bulldogs are still clearly the number 1 team in the country, and with Texas's loss to Texas Tech this week, Alabama lacks the resume to really jump up and replace them in the top of the polls, the top of the team rankings. Georgia knows it has to play better than, quite frankly, it has in both home games so far this season against both Samford and Kent State. But the upcoming schedule makes things pretty easy for Georgia to get right against, as Missouri, Auburn, and Vanderbilt might be the 3 worst teams in the SEC. That's who Georgia's next 3 games against, with the latter 2 coming at home. Bulldogs know they have a number of things to clean up and work on, and if this Georgia team is going to go deep into the playoff once again and potentially win it all, they're going to have to play a lot better than they did on Saturday. That's the standard at Georgia football, and it's the era that we're currently living in now, where you need an A game every single Saturday. Otherwise, there are going to be questions about just how good and focused and locked in this Georgia team really is.
I'm glad we had some adversity. You could probably argue it wasn't enough. I mean, you still had, whatever, 10-point lead there. I mean, the adversity to me is overcoming those turnovers and going out and making stops, sudden change, making stops. The red area stop was really big for the defense. But their defense came back with a big red area stop. So I think you gain confidence when you play in games like that. And like I said, I got a lot of respect for Kent State.
I think it was big because we did, and I'm glad we didn't have to punt that last drive. I told him before we went out there the last time, I said, either we score or the ball ends in our hands, right? And we did that. So it was a really good drive. And Coach Marty said sometimes you do need to win ugly, and I agree with that. But you'd rather not, right?
What do you learn from the red zone issue concerns, things you can?
That was our deep shot. We're going to try that every week here. Try and give you some deeper context and thoughts on this week and what we saw this past weekend and what it means going forward for Georgia football. Now we've got an interview medley coming up where you're going to hear from Kirby Smart, Brock Bowers, Stetson Bennett, Tate Ratledge, and a host of other Bulldogs as they recap this past week against Kent State, while also looking ahead to the rest of the season. Then after that, we're going to answer your questions here with the live Q&A. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, as I really appreciate this and love taking the time for you guys to get to see some more from Georgia football, as well as answer some of the questions you guys have. My name is Connor Riley, and this has been a Dog Nation production.
I'm glad we had some adversity. You could probably argue it wasn't enough. I mean, you still had, whatever, 10-point lead there. I mean, the adversity to me is overcoming those turnovers and going out and making stops, sudden change, making stops. The red area stop was really big for the defense, but their defense came back with a big red area stop. So I think you gain confidence when you play in games like that. And like I said, I got a lot of respect for Kent State.
How similar is their odd stack to something you might see later on in the year against a team like Mississippi State?
Well, they didn't play it the whole time, so they were in and out of it. Going into the game, we expected them to play at a higher percentage, and they didn't. They played more 4-down than we expected, which doesn't affect us. We play 4-down every day, so they're not a true stack team. They move around and do some different things, and they do a really good job of mixing it up. You can tell they've studied some other defenses and do a nice job. But their defensive coordinator will tell you, dude, he still gave up 550 yards. I mean, okay, so it's not like it's all relative to what you expect. I mean, we can't turn the ball over, and I thought our offense executed really good based on what their defensive plan was.
Jalen Walker got in there and blocked the punt. Just what have you seen from him throughout this year?
Probably should have laid it out a little bit more. I think Mark's probably got to run a little bit more. But dude was above Mark, saw it, took eyes, undercut it, and picked it off. It was a good play, but got to fix that.
What did Kirby say to you guys in the locker room at halftime?
At halftime? Can't remember. I remember what he just said, if you want to hear that.
What did he say?
He said they're a good football team, and we had some miscues, but he said we didn't punt and can't turn the ball through over 3 times. But 39-22 against a good football team. Again, I told their head coach they're a really good football team. So.
Just, you were talking about the slow start. Were you kind of surprised that you guys did start slow, especially after Brock's touchdown on that? I think that was the second play of the game.
I don't know about surprised, and again, I don't know about starting slow. We turned the ball over 3 times, right? We didn't have to punt. We had to kick too many field goals, but that was penalty, and I missed that throw to Mark. But other than that, we played well. There's just little things where not quite as dialed in, maybe, but you don't really know until you go play.
As a quarterback, how reassuring is it to have a guy like Brock who can seemingly create a big play out of nothing?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have a guy like that where you can throw in the ball or throw him a quick pass or hand the ball off to him and he has the chance to, go the distance, it's special. But everybody sees Brock, everybody sees Brock run. But they don't see his Mark outside, blocking, everybody blocking their butts off, right? And then are you going to make one person miss? And Brock made one person miss on that. But everybody else was blocked and accounted for, which is part of the selflessness of this team that I think everybody takes pride in.
We just came out. They were a good football team, and we had some little mistakes that cost us big time. Just myself do a bunch of stuff a little bit better, and I think that's all it really was, just doing little stuff better. And they were a good football team. So.
Take us through the second play of the game, your 75-yarder.
Oh yeah, I just took it. No one was there. I just took off, and I was just thinking, this is a long ways. At the end, I was like, man, come a long ways.
When you got here, did you envision being used in this variety of ways? Were you used this way in high school?
Yeah, I was a little bit in high school, and you always kind of hope to be used. So I'm happy with it, and I just never really expected it, but I guess it's happened.
Is there a running back trapped inside your tight end body here?
Oh, I don't know. I played running back a little bit in high school, so
yeah,
maybe a little bit.
Did they talk to you about that in recruiting, or was there a point last year when Bucket came to you and said, look, we're going to do this?
Yeah, there wasn't really a point in recruiting, but I don't really remember the point. It was just kind of giving people the ball, whichever way we could, I guess.
You don't remember any moment, like the first time they said, all right, we're putting you,
I guess it was Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt on that. I had a rush touchdown last year in Vanderbilt, so I think that was where it kind of happened.
Because every week you show up, is there some new wrinkle for you to learn how they're going to use you in a different way?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like Monk and always making stuff up for the defense that we're playing and stuff off of things we did last week. So it's always fun to see and fun to learn.
How do you keep it straight everywhere that you have to line up?
It's hard.
How do you keep it straight? You're lining up all over the place.
Oh yeah, just focusing, doing it all week helps me. So.
Is there anything good that comes from having to make plays in the fourth quarter for the first time this season and sort of having to be sharp and get it done?
Yeah, I think it was kind of needed, like I said, it was just big, learning experience. We haven't had a game that close just all year really, so I'm glad it kind of went all the way through just to get that feeling back and
Brock, what do you think the big thing the offense needs to clean up is? What's going through your mind right now after this?
Yeah, I think the little things, just little assignments, because that leads to bigger things. So, that was at least for me, just doing little things right.
3 rushes, 3 touchdowns. That's kind of a hard pace to continue.
I guess so. We'll see. Yeah. Yep.
Do you consider yourself a tight end, or is there another position that, are you an H-back or are you
I don't know. I guess tight end, but I just line up with it whenever they tell me.
Now, can you throw the ball too? Can you throw for
Not very well. I can throw it a long ways, but not very accurately. Yeah.
What do you think when you come around that end, though? You see right away that
quarterback, some good receivers, and a big old line. So, much respect to Kent State. They try to spread us out and hit it with a couple RPOs and things like that. Try to get behind us, but respect to Kent State.
You have 2 sacks today. It seemed like the game really slowed down for you. What did you make of your performance out there today?
I just listened to the game plan. Coach said, and I followed through. We got to listen throughout the week, and these coaches are smart. They're pushing, listen to make them kind of play, and that's what I just did this week.
Your 4th career start, do you feel like things are starting to sort of click a little bit more now that you're getting these reps? Your 4th game as a starter, you're sort of in the middle of the season now, and things aren't quite as new as they were, say, game 1 against Oregon?
Definitely. Through each week, in and out, you get better, you progress better, you communicate better, you play better, and the teams get better. So, of course, I expect to get better each and every week.
What did you make of the defensive performance there, especially in the second half?
I don't think we did. I don't think we held us to the Georgia standard, and that's something we got to work on when we get back to the lab Monday. We got to come prepared Monday to work. Try to hold that standard next week.
Was it anything that they were doing, or is it just you guys not playing? Was it anything that they were doing in particular, going tempo, spreading you guys out, or what was the reason you guys didn't play at your standard?
A few guys got a little gas, but tempo, they try to push the tempo the second half. We got a little lazy, relaxed on defense, but we just got to come back in condition this week, and hopefully things change.
On Dumas Johnson's play, I think he had 2 of those sacks, and he had a couple tackles for loss at halftime.
Yeah, I tell you, he's practicing really good right now. He's slowly becoming that vocal leader of the unit. He commands respect the way he practices. The walkthroughs before the game, man, I love the way he's maturing and he's getting more confidence. You know, I don't want to comment on how he played, but it sounds like he played good based on those statistics you just gave. But he practices the right way, so it doesn't surprise me. I was holding my breath on that one. I was proud of him, as he says that he doesn't have the best hands out there, but he did catch that one, and he even got a little extra return yards. So he'll be showing his kids that one for a long time. He stays out extra and catches kicks each week, so that's why we do what we do.
Stetson.
All right, and welcome in everybody. Not exactly the sharpestly edited internet era interview medley there, but we were a little pressed for time today. Georgia Tech announces right as we're getting ready here around 6 o'clock, or they haven't announced it yet, but Ken Segura of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has reported that Jeff Collins is out at Georgia Tech in the middle of his 4th year there. They are off to a 1-3 start, 10-28 as the head coach there for the Yellow Jackets, and has a very unique distinction in that he never coached a game in Athens, despite playing for one of Georgia's biggest rivals, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. They did not play in 2020 as the game was canceled due to scheduling issues between the ACC and the SEC as a part of the COVID-19 pandemic. They played in 2019. Georgia Tech lost that one 52-7. Georgia played them again last season, beat them 45-0. Tech elected to keep him around for another year, and that pretty clearly proved to be a mistake as they get off to a 1-3 start here. Some other news and notes out there coming out of the Kent State game. Kenny Mcintosh is dealing with a thigh contusion. Kirby Smart had said that he had been dealing with that coming into the game, and then obviously hit in the 4th quarter that knocked him out of the game, sort of re-aggravated that. But I expect him to probably go about playing this week. I would say I think A.D. Mitchell is probably going to travel with the team this week and likely give it a go this Saturday against Missouri. We'll see how much he is able to play, but I think he'll be back pretty close to 100% by the Auburn game. I would also include Arian Smith in that as well there. It looks like I think he is a guy that maybe that Auburn game on October 8th, Georgia's next home game, is when he is back. I think Jalen Carter will probably play a larger role than he played this week as they were sort of limiting his snaps due to an ankle injury. We've sort of known that was going to be the case after what had happened with their usage there in South Carolina. So Kenny Mcintosh, thigh contusion, ankles for both A.D. Mitchell and Arian Smith. I expect both those guys to be 100% by the Auburn game on October 8th. And then Jalen Carter dealing with his ankle injury. I expect him to be pretty close to a full go this week against Missouri. And with that, we will open it up to your questions. Any thoughts, comments you guys have coming out of the game? Obviously, as we sort of touched on in Connor and coverage tonight, not Georgia's greatest effort out there, but still enough to win. They do not punt in the game. They have 3 early turnovers, and offensively, I think really cleaned it up from there. You know, you still probably want to see them be a little bit better in the red zone, but I think in that game, and I sort of touched on this on the deep shot, in comparison to when Georgia has played Oregon and South Carolina, 2 Power 5 foes, they are operating at such a clearly high level that is the standard that is now expected of them every week. And when they don't 100% live up to that, as they did not against Samford in their first home game of the year or this past home game, you sort of start asking questions and, okay, what are some things you see about this team and why can't they play like that all the time? Reality is it's just really hard to play at that A-plus level all the time. And I think if there's one thing that I'm legitimately concerned about coming out of this game, it's not so much the offense. You know, the turnovers, that's probably the worst game Ladd McConkey is going to play in his Georgia career. He's going to be just fine. Still led the team in receiving yesterday. Just not the best day overall from McConkey. I think defensively, and looking through some of the snap counts, they only played 20 guys there, and they are a little thin in that, especially in that back 7. They only play 3 inside linebackers and Tresman Marshall Shamel Munden and Jamon Dumas-Johnson. They only play 3 outside linebackers. I am interested in seeing, especially as we get into the season, especially as they play a Tennessee team, a Mississippi State team, a teams that want to go fast later on in the season, how that depth holds up there. Now, missing Jalen Carter, obviously, I think impacts how this defense played on Saturday, and I think especially you saw that there in the second half of the game. So if you're telling me you get a healthy Jalen Carter out there, maybe that defensive performance does look a little different. But Kent State putting together back-to-back 12-play and 13-play drives in the second half and getting scoring drives on both of those, that's more concerning to me than, say, giving up the big play touchdown they gave up in the second quarter there, because I just think that's a one-play mistake, and I do think that is pretty easily correctable with coaching and whatnot. So I think if you're taking something away and you want to be legitimately concerned, watch for how that defense played there in the second half. Kent State, 12-play drive, a 13-play drive, leading 10 points there. Offensively, obviously, you got to finish off touchdowns there, but I think as this offense gets healthier, they get Kenny Mcintosh back, they get A.D. Mitchell and Arian Smith back. This offense is going to be quite potent, and I think they also have in their back pocket, they know, and Mike Griffith sort of touched on this earlier today, why doesn't Georgia get the ball more to Brock? You don't want to wear him out and have the wear and tear at the end of the season. That way you have, say, a John Mechie or a Jamison Williams scenario where they have logged so many extra snaps and so many extra touches that by the end of the year, the wear and tear catches up to them and they're not able to finish out the season. You need Brock Bowers to be at his best against Alabama in the SEC championship game, potentially against Ohio State, Clemson, USC, Michigan, whoever in the college football playoff. And so you don't need him taking extra hits in games against Kent State, in games against Missouri, in games against Auburn, quite frankly, with the way that program is being run at this point in time. So I think with that in mind, that's sort of, Brock's going to make the most of his touches. 5 touchdowns the last 2 games, 75-yard rushing touchdown yesterday. He's quite good. So I don't think that you need to force feed him the ball right now, because we've seen he can make big plays regardless of when you get him the ball. And you do need to make sure that he is healthy at the end of the year. And I would say the same thing with Darnold Washington. I think these two guys in simpatico are incredibly important to what this Georgia offense does, not just in terms of production, but in terms of opening things up for other people. Let's see. Questions. Joe Moody, we will not have Aaron Judge home runs breaking in on this feed here. We are a Red Sox fan, although it is cool to try and see him break the record, or at least tie the record in this case. But we will not have any interruptions, unlike it sounds like was the case on Saturday for some college football fans. JC, if he gets 15 to 20 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards receiving, I think there's a really good case there. He's going to need to hit those statistical benchmarks because it's clear he is one of, if not the best players in the country. And if he's getting close to 20 touchdowns, I think Kyle Pitts was close a few years ago. So if you add in, let's say 15, 16 touchdowns, 1,000 yards receiving, I think he's at 276 right now. So he's going to need to have some big receiving games in terms of production to get there. But if he does that and Georgia's in the college football playoff, I could very well see him at least getting an invitation on the basis of best player on the best team in the country. I think it's going to be really hard for him to win it unless he gets like 1,500 yards receiving, and I don't foresee that happening. I'm not even totally sure I see 1,000 yards happening for Bowers, but if he gets 15 to 20 total touchdowns this year, I think there's going to be a very strong argument for Bowers to get there, provided Georgia takes care of business, is in the college football playoff, and if they're the best team in the country through the first 13 games of the season, then yeah, that's really going to help his Heisman candidacy. Dejean Edwards, wrote about him yesterday, thought about including him in winners and losers. I've been a longtime fan of Dejean Edwards, longtime readers know I call him the human victory cigar. That guy just runs hard, and as he gets more and more reps, I think you're going to continue to see some good things from him. You heard Kirby Smart on the video there. He does an excellent job of breaking tackles. I think he brings a physicality to this offense that when you mix it with the vertical passing offense, I think makes for a really potent combination there offensively. And Kenny Mcintosh dealing with a thigh injury. Kendall Milton, a productive player, but not quite looking like the game record that I think some people thought he would. I think he's left a few plays out on the field. I'm sure he'd tell you that. As he, I think it's fair to wonder, how healthy is he in terms of mentally trusting his body, given he has had injury history with both knee injuries and a hamstring injury in the preseason. Georgia can't afford to keep Dejean Edwards off the field. That is a guy that I think they very much need to work into their running back rotation and give consistent carries to, because I think as you saw in the second half yesterday, he did some very impressive things for this offense. Brian Kephart asking about Javon Bullard. Yes, arrested this morning, 7 misdemeanor charges. One of those was a DUI. I've seen some people point out that, he only had .02. Javon Bullard is under the age of 21, and so that is why he was charged with the DUI there. You're out driving at 5 in the morning. You run the risk of having that happen. I don't think Bullard is going to be suspended. Georgia has not suspended players in the past for DUIs, and so I expect him to see it to be out there on the field. Kirby Smart is going to come out and say this will be handled internally. But I expect Bullard to start against Missouri this coming Saturday. Should he, personally speaking here, I don't. I think you should be suspended for a DUI, regardless of what you blow, if you were arrested with that and charged with it. I think that is a serious enough infraction that you should face real consequences for it. Kirby Smart runs the program, and based on historical precedent, he has disagreed with that fact. And so even without him, Tyke Smith, I don't believe played yesterday. Trying to remember the participation charts off the top of my head there. William Poole obviously no longer on this team. I think if they needed to in a pinch, what they would do would be move Chris Smith to star and then have Malachi Starks and Dan Jackson play as your safeties back there. That stretches your secondary a little bit thin there. And obviously you don't want to see Bullard making those types of decisions out there, especially after he's been a starter and a positive force on the football field for Georgia, but arrested this morning on 7 misdemeanor charges, one of which was a DUI for drinking under the age of 21. While drinking under the age of 21. Any other questions, thoughts? Yes, Joe Moody, Kirby Smart will certainly comment on it tomorrow as well when he is asked about it. Jerry Dogs fan, yes, I think this is the one thing that I'm interested in seeing from Dejean in terms of if he can show himself as a pass catcher or acquit himself in terms of coming out of the backfield and being a receiving option. That's really going to open up the door for him and to play in this offense, because we know Kendall Milton and Kenny Mcintosh are both plus players in terms of pass catching ability. And I think they can impact the game that way. I think that's the one question I think I still have with Edwards. And it's not to say that he can't do it. It's just that we haven't seen him have the opportunity to do so yet. And if and when that does come, I think that's going to answer a lot of questions in terms of how complete a running back is Dejean Edwards for this offense. Let's see. Questions, thoughts. Anything else before we get out of here? Obviously, Georgia plays Missouri this week. 28.5 point favorite. I expect the Bulldogs to win rather easily this week. I think you're going to have a nice bounce back performance after the Kent State game from this past weekend. Missouri, quite frankly, is not very good. I think they might be the worst team in the SEC. And we sort of touched on this, and I'll have a story probably on this tomorrow. Georgia's probably going to play the 3 worst teams in the SEC in the next 3 weeks. Missouri this week, Auburn the week after that, and then Vanderbilt the following week. And they're really not going to be tested, I think, for quite some time here. And unfortunately, it's just the way the schedule goes, and Auburn has really backslid as a program. I know Bruce Feldman had reported yesterday that had they lost, and they came mere inches away from losing to Missouri yesterday, that Harsin could have been out as early as today. It would not surprise me if he ends up getting fired if they lose to LSU this weekend. It would certainly not surprise me if the Georgia game is his last game as the head coach there at Auburn. The writing is pretty clearly on the wall with Harsin there. Obviously, we touched on it earlier. Georgia Tech making a move, moving on from Jeff Collins. Chip Long is expected to be the interim coach there. The Yellow Jackets come to Athens for the first time since the 2018 season. On November 26th there. Jeff Collins no longer the head coach. I sort of had a story on this up tonight. I don't think that's a job for Todd Monken per se, given how much he makes and what other things might be available out there. I would say watch for Del McGee, given his ties to the state of Georgia, his ability to recruit the state of Atlanta, his standing within this Georgia staff, and quite frankly within this state. We'll see if he ends up getting that offer there. And I think he would be an excellent fit there at Georgia Tech. He understands what it takes to win at a big program, and I think can make things work there. But it sounds like Georgia Tech is also going to have to hire a new athletic director, as well as Todd Sansbury, the guy who hired Jeff Collins, is on his way out, according to Ken Singura there as well. So it'll be interesting to sort of see how all that plays out in the next 24 hours for Georgia Tech. Bulldogs against Missouri this weekend. I think it's going to be a better performance than you saw against Kent State this past week. I think you're going to see some healthy players get back. A.D. Mitchell, I think, being chief among them. And from there, again, this is a Georgia schedule. It's not great. Given that Alabama goes on the road to Arkansas next week, if they look impressive against the Razorbacks, I could see Alabama jumping Georgia for that number 1 spot, regardless of what Missouri does. And that just sort of speaks to, I think, the Georgia schedule right now. It's going to get tougher in the month of November with 3 straight games against Tennessee, at Mississippi State and at Kentucky. Two of those teams are ranked in the top 10. I'm still not super impressed with Tennessee after what they did yesterday. A home win over Florida in a game. I think they're the better team, but I think the score should have been a little bit more lopsided there than what we saw in this Tennessee team. Look, I mean, that was a Florida team that went toe-to-toe with South Florida, really struggled to move the ball against Kentucky, and they put up 33 points in that game and probably should have had even more. So I think if you're Tennessee, you definitely still have some defensive things to shore up there. And as potent and as strong as Hendon Hooker has looked, this Georgia offense is better than Tennessee's offense. And while, yes, they were missing Cedric Tillman yesterday, I think Georgia is going to cause some real problems for Tennessee when they meet on November 5th. This has been Connor in Coverage. My name is Connor Riley. We'll be back here doing this every Sunday night. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You'll have Brandon Adams tomorrow. You'll have Mike Griffith tomorrow. We'll have a Kirby press conference there tomorrow as well. So we are in the thick of the season. 4 September games done. We were a third of the way through the regular season. It sounds crazy to say that out loud, but the season is moving along. We're going to keep churning out stories for you guys on Dog Nation. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. My name is Connor Riley. This has been a Dog Nation production, and Connor in Coverage. Have a wonderful Sunday night. We will see you on the pages of Dog Nation and on the videos in the coming hours, it seems, as BA will probably be on in about 13 hours from now. So thanks, everybody. Have a great Sunday night. My name is Connor Riley. Thank you so much for tuning in.